I realized she had stopped loving me on a Tuesday night. But the strange part is that nothing dramatic happened. No shouting, no slammed doors, no confession, just silence. It was raining outside, the kind of slow, steady rain that taps against the windows like someone trying to get your attention. I remember it clearly because I had just come home from work, soaked from the walk between the parking lot and our building. The apartment smelled like tomato soup. She used to make it whenever it rained. For years, that smell meant comfort. That night it didn't. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, a mug in front of her. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Hey," I said, shaking water from my jacket. "Hey," she answered, still looking at the screen. Normally she would get up, kiss me, complain about the weather, or ask how my day went. We had 1,000 little routines like that. They had formed slowly over 8 years together. But that night none of them happened. I told myself she was just tired. Work had been stressful for both of us lately. She worked remotely as a designer, and deadlines had been brutal. I tried not to read into things. Relationships have quiet days. That's normal. At least that's what I thought. I changed out of my wet clothes and sat across from her at the table. The soup was already poured into bowls. "You already ate?" I asked. "Yeah, I had a call earlier." She didn't look up again. I started eating while she kept typing. The sound of her keyboard filled the room. Rain against the windows. Keyboard clicks. Spoon against the bowl. It felt like sitting next to a stranger in a cafe. I tried to start a conversation. "Remember that little diner we went to last winter? The one with the terrible coffee?" She blinked, like she had to return from somewhere far away. "Yeah, I think so. You loved their pancakes." "They were okay." That answer stuck with me. Emily didn't do okay. She either loved things or hated them. That was part of why I fell for her in the first place. When she loved something, the whole world seemed brighter. But the way she said it, it sounded like she was talking about a place she'd never actually been. After dinner, she carried her bowl to the sink and went back to the couch. Laptop again. Headphones this time. I sat there longer than I needed to. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't explain it. Not yet. Later that night, I joined her in the living room. She was scrolling through something, the screen reflecting in her glasses. "What are you watching?" I asked. "Just videos." "What kind?" She shrugged. "Nothing interesting. We used to watch everything together. Dumb reality shows, documentaries about space, cooking competitions where we'd argue about which contestant would win." Now I felt like I needed permission to sit beside her. I lowered myself onto the couch anyway. Our shoulders didn't touch. I don't know why that detail bothered me so much. It wasn't intentional. There was plenty of space. But before, we always leaned into each other without thinking. Now there was this small, careful distance. At some point she laughed at something on her screen. Not a big laugh. Just a short one. I turned toward her. "What's funny?" "Just a clip someone sent." "Who?" "Work group." Another short answer. It was like every sentence between us had become a hallway with closed doors on both sides. I tried again. "Want to watch a movie later?" She paused the video and looked at me for a moment. Not annoyed. Not angry. Just distant. "I'm pretty tired tonight." "Oh, okay." A year earlier, we would have stayed up until 2 in the morning arguing about what to watch. Now the conversation died in less than 10 seconds. She went to bed around 11. I stayed on the couch pretending to watch TV, but mostly I stared at the dark window and listened to the rain. That's when the thought first appeared. Quiet. Uninvited. Something has changed. But I didn't want to believe it. Because the truth was that Emily had been slowly drifting away for months, and I had been pretending not to see it. That Tuesday night was just the first time I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The next morning started like every other morning we had shared for years, except it didn't feel like ours anymore. Emily woke up before me. That alone wasn't unusual. She had always been an early riser while I needed 2 alarms and a small miracle to get out of bed. But normally she would shake my shoulder lightly, kiss my cheek, or at least mumble something half asleep before leaving the room. That morning I woke up to the sound of the coffee machine. No voice. No touch. Just the low mechanical hum from the kitchen. For a few seconds I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that nothing was wrong. People have quiet days. Couples go through phases. Not every moment has to feel like the first year of a relationship. Still, something heavy sat in my chest. When I walked into the kitchen, she was already dressed. Jeans, gray sweater, hair tied up loosely. She looked the same as always, but somehow also completely different. She was scrolling on her phone while leaning against the counter. Morning, I said. Morning. Short. Neutral. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her at the small kitchen table. Usually mornings were when we talked the most. We would complain about work, plan dinner, or joke about something stupid we saw online. That morning the silence felt thick. You have meetings today? I asked. A few. With the new client? Yeah. Her eyes stayed on her phone. I waited a moment, hoping she'd add something. Normally, she would launch into a rant about the client's ridiculous requests or how they kept changing the design direction every week. But nothing came. So, how's it going with them? I tried again. They're fine. That word again. Fine. It was like someone had replaced Emily with a version of her that only spoke in neutral responses. I stirred my coffee even though there was nothing in it. Did you sleep okay? I asked. Yeah. Another dead end. The strangest part was that she didn't seem uncomfortable with the silence. She wasn't tense or irritated. She just seemed uninterested. Like conversation with me was something optional. After a few minutes, she finished her coffee and stood up. I'm going to start work. Already. She checked the time on her phone. I have a call in 20 minutes. Oh. She walked past me toward the small room we used as her home office. Right before closing the door, she paused. Don't forget the landlord said the rent transfer is due today, right? I'll do it after work. Okay. Then the door closed. I sat there for another 10 minutes staring at the empty mug in front of me. It wasn't one big thing that bothered me. It was the thousand little things that had disappeared. The small touches. The casual conversations. The way she used to smile when I walked into a room. It felt like our relationship had quietly lost its background music. When I left for work that morning, she didn't come out of the office to say goodbye. I knocked lightly on the door. Heading out, I said. Okay, drive safe. Her voice sounded distant through the door. No love you. No see you tonight. Just a polite goodbye. On the drive to work, I kept replaying the last few months in my head. The signs had been there. At first it was small things. She stopped asking about my day. Then we stopped eating dinner together regularly. Then weekends started filling up with work or calls with friends. I had told myself it was normal. People get busy. Life gets complicated. But the truth was that Emily used to include me in everything. Even when she had a stressful day, she would talk about it with me. Now it felt like she had built a quiet wall between us. At work I couldn't concentrate. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from her. Something normal. A meme. A random thought. A complaint about her client. Nothing came. Around lunchtime I texted her. How's your day going? She replied 20 minutes later. Busy. That was it. No question back. No conversation. I stared at the message longer than I should have. It looked like something you would send to a coworker, not someone you had lived with for 5 years. That was when a second, more uncomfortable thought started forming in my mind. Maybe it wasn't stress. Maybe it wasn't work. Maybe she wasn't drifting away because life was complicated. Maybe she was drifting away because she already had. And I was just the last one to realize it. For the next few days, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. People change. Relationships evolve. That's what everyone says after enough years together. The excitement fades, routines take over, and life becomes quieter. I repeated that idea in my head like it was some kind of protective shield. But the more I watched Emily, the harder it became to believe. Thursday evening was when I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. I came home earlier than usual that day. Traffic had been surprisingly light, and for once I didn't have to stay late at work fixing someone else's mistakes. I was actually looking forward to seeing her. When I walked into the apartment, the living room lights were off, but I could hear her voice from the bedroom. She was laughing. Not the small, polite laugh I had heard earlier that week. A real one. Warm. Natural. The kind that used to fill the entire apartment. I stopped in the hallway without meaning to. Her door was slightly open, and I could hear her talking. No. Stop. You're exaggerating. Another laugh. A pause. Then she said something quieter that I couldn't fully hear, followed by another laugh, softer this time. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have. It felt strange because that version of Emily, the relaxed, playful one, hadn't appeared around me in weeks. I knocked lightly on the door. The laughter stopped immediately. A second later her voice changed. Yeah. I pushed the door open a little. Hey. She was sitting on the bed with her laptop beside her and her phone in her hand. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call. Oh, you're home early. Yeah. I waited for her to say something else, But she just set the phone down. Who were you talking to? I asked casually. Just Sarah. Sarah was one of her coworkers. I had met her once at a company event. Nice enough. What were you guys laughing about? I asked. Emily shrugged. Just work stuff. That answer should have been normal. But something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. I nodded anyway. Sounds like it was a good conversation. Yeah. The silence returned almost immediately. I leaned against the doorframe. Want to order something tonight? I'm too tired to cook. Sure. What do you want? Anything's fine. That phrase again. Anything's fine. It was like every opinion she used to have had been slowly erased. We ordered takeout from a Thai place nearby. While we waited, she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone while I pretended to watch TV. At one point, her screen lit up with a message. Her face changed slightly. Not dramatically, just a quick smile that disappeared almost instantly. But I noticed it. She typed something quickly. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to wonder. Something funny? I asked. She looked up. You smiled. Oh, just Sarah again. Another quick answer. I nodded slowly. When the food arrived, we ate in front of the TV like we had done hundreds of times before. Except this time it felt like we were co-workers forced to share a lunch break. Halfway through dinner, she checked her phone again. Then again 5 minutes later. By the fourth time, I couldn't ignore it anymore. You're really popular tonight, I said. She looked up, slightly confused. What? You keep getting messages. Oh, just work. At 9 at night? She hesitated for a moment. Yeah, the client's in a different time zone. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the explanation didn't sit right with me. The biggest problem wasn't the possibility that she was hiding something. It was that she seemed happier when talking to whoever was on that phone than when she was sitting next to me. Later that night, after we finished eating, she stood up and stretched. I think I'm going to shower. Okay. She walked toward the bathroom, phone still in her hand. A minute later, I heard the shower start. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She had forgotten it. I stared at it. The screen lit up again. Another message. For a moment, I told myself to ignore it. Trust matters. Privacy matters. I had always believed that. But the quiet voice in the back of my mind kept repeating the same question. Why does she sound happier with someone else? The phone buzzed again. And without fully thinking it through, I reached for it. The moment my hand touched her phone, I felt like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Emily and I had always respected each other's privacy. We knew each other's passcodes, but neither of us ever felt the need to check. Trust had never been something we questioned. At least, not until recently. The screen lit up again in my hand. Another message. For a second, I just stared at the notification without opening it. The name at the top of the screen made my stomach tighten. Daniel. Not Sarah. Not a coworker I recognized. Just Daniel. The message preview was short. Still laughing about what you said earlier. My chest felt strangely hollow. I told myself it could still be work. Maybe a colleague I hadn't heard about. Maybe someone from a project team. But the way she had laughed earlier, it didn't sound like a work conversation. The phone vibrated again. Another message. Wish we could grab a drink tonight, instead of hiding behind screens. I felt the blood drain from my face. For a few seconds, I just sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was reading. My first instinct was to unlock the phone and scroll through everything. But I didn't. Not yet. Because a heavier realization was already settling in. This wasn't just about a secret conversation. It was about the way she sounded with him. Alive. Present. Interested. All the things she hadn't been with me lately. The bathroom door opened down the hallway. I quickly set the phone back on the table exactly where it had been. Emily walked back into the living room with damp hair and a towel over her shoulders. She stopped when she saw me sitting there. You okay? Yeah. My voice sounded normal somehow. She picked up her phone and glanced at the screen. I watched her eyes move slightly as she read the messages. A small smile appeared again. Not big, but real. She typed a quick response. Then she looked up at me. Do you want to watch something? For a second, I almost laughed. It was such a normal question. Like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. Sure, I said. We turned on a random show neither of us really paid attention to. She kept texting occasionally, though she tried to be subtle about it. Each time the screen lit up, I felt the same dull weight in my chest. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly I felt confused. Because technically, I hadn't seen anything that proved she was cheating. Just messages. But something deeper bothered me more. Emily used to talk to me like that. The jokes. The excitement. The little bursts of happiness. Now those moments belonged to someone named Daniel. Halfway through the episode, she suddenly stood up. I'm actually really tired tonight. Okay, I think I'm going to sleep. All right. She leaned down and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. It was so fast and automatic that it barely felt real. Then she walked to the bedroom and closed the door. I sat on the couch for a long time after that. The TV kept playing episode after episode, but I wasn't watching any of it. My mind kept replaying the messages. Still laughing about what you said earlier. Wish we could grab a drink tonight. The worst part was imagining her laughing like that again. Just not with me. Around midnight, I turned the TV off and went to bed. Emily was already asleep, facing the other side of the bed. There used to be a time when she would roll toward me in her sleep and rest her hand on my chest. That night, there was a noticeable space between us. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. 100 questions ran through my mind. Who was Daniel? How long had they been talking? Was it just flirting? Or something more? But the question that hurt the most was simpler than all the others. When did I stop being the person who made her laugh like that? Sometime around 3 in the morning, I finally understood something I had been avoiding. The messages weren't the real problem. They were just proof of something that had already happened. Emily hadn't stopped loving me that night. Or that week. She had stopped long before. I had just been too comfortable to notice. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had barely slept at all. Emily was already out of bed again. The sound of the coffee machine hummed faintly from the kitchen, repeating the same routine from earlier in the week. For a moment, I considered pretending to still be asleep. Avoiding the conversation felt easier than facing whatever this had become. But I couldn't stay in that bed forever. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table again with her laptop open. The same posture, the same quiet focus on the screen. For a brief second, I studied her face. Nothing looked different. No guilt, no nervousness, just calm. Morning, she said. Morning. I poured coffee and sat across from her. My mind kept returning to the name on her phone. Daniel. I thought about asking directly, just saying the name and watching her reaction. But something held me back. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. Or maybe I was afraid of confirming what I already knew. Instead, I tried something else. You seemed in a good mood yesterday when you were talking to Sarah, I said carefully. Emily glanced up. Oh yeah? You guys were laughing a lot. She nodded slightly. Yeah, she's funny. I watched her expression closely. If she felt uncomfortable lying, she didn't show it. I stirred my coffee slowly. You talk to her a lot lately? Sometimes. Late at night, too. She shrugged. Work stuff. Another closed answer. For a moment, I almost told her I had seen the messages. But the conversation would immediately turn into an argument about privacy instead of honesty. And strangely, I didn't want to fight. Not yet. Because the more I watched her that morning, the clearer something else became. Emily wasn't acting like someone hiding a terrible secret. She was acting like someone who had already emotionally checked out. That realization hit harder than the messages themselves. After breakfast, she returned to her office again. The door closed softly. I sat alone at the table for several minutes. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. For years it had been our space. Every corner filled with shared memories, vacations we planned, furniture we chose together, stupid little decorations she insisted on buying. Now it felt like I was living inside a museum of a relationship that no longer existed. At work that day, I finally did something I should have done weeks earlier. I stopped pretending everything was normal. During lunch, I sat in my car and opened my phone. Instead of texting Emily, I scrolled through old photos. Trips, birthdays, random selfies. In almost every picture, Emily was smiling directly at the camera. But when I looked closer, I realized something strange. Most of those photos were from years ago. There were barely any recent ones. Somewhere along the way, we had stopped documenting our lives together. That small detail bothered me more than I expected. It was like our relationship had slowly faded without either of us acknowledging it. Later that afternoon, Emily actually texted me first. My heart jumped a little when the notification appeared. For a brief moment, I hoped it might be something normal, something warm. The message was short. Are you going to be home late tonight? I stared at the screen. No, I replied. Why? A minute passed. Then two. Finally, another message appeared. I might go out with coworkers. Coworkers. The words sat there like a carefully chosen shield. What time? I asked. Not sure yet. I hesitated before typing the next question. Is Daniel going? 3 dots appeared instantly. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. It took almost 30 seconds before her response came through. Who's Daniel? I leaned back in my seat. The lie was so direct it almost impressed me. I looked at the message for a long time before replying. I saw the message on your phone last night. This time the typing bubble appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Minutes passed. No response. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. By the time she finally replied, my hands had already stopped shaking. It's just someone from work. Just someone from work. 3 years earlier that answer would have been enough. But now I could feel something shifting inside me. Not anger. Not jealousy. Something colder. Understanding. Because deep down I already knew the truth. The real problem wasn't Daniel. The real problem was that the woman sitting in my apartment, drinking coffee every morning, wasn't in love with me anymore. And I was finally starting to accept it. Her reply stayed on my screen for the rest of the afternoon. It's just someone from work. I must have read the sentence 20 times. Each time it felt more hollow. 3 years ago, I would have believed it without hesitation. I trusted Emily more than anyone. If she told me something, that was the end of the conversation. But trust doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes quietly. Little doubts. Small inconsistencies. Moments where something doesn't feel right, but you ignore it because love makes you want to believe the best version of someone. By the time I finished work that evening, the apartment already felt different in my mind. Not because of Daniel, but because the illusion I had been holding on to for months had finally cracked. When I opened the front door, Emily was in the kitchen packing something into a small bag. She looked up. "Oh, you're home." "Yeah." For a moment, we just looked at each other. There was an awkwardness between us that hadn't existed before. Not the quiet distance from earlier in the week. Something heavier. "You're going out?" I asked. "Yeah, just drinks with a few people." "From work?" "Yeah." She avoided eye contact while adjusting the strap on her bag. I leaned against the counter. "Does Daniel work with you?" Her hand stopped moving for a second. Then she continued packing. "Why are you asking like that?" "I'm just curious." "You already read my messages," she said flatly. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. But the sentence carried an edge. "I saw one notification," I replied. "That's not the same thing." She zipped the bag closed. "You still shouldn't have looked. I didn't unlock your phone." "That doesn't make it better." For a second, I almost apologized automatically, the way people do when they want to smooth things over. But something stopped me. Instead, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest all day. "Are you meeting him tonight?" Emily finally looked directly at me. Her expression wasn't guilty. It was tired. "I'm meeting coworkers." "That's not what I asked." Silence filled the kitchen. I watched her face carefully, waiting for some kind of explanation. Instead, she exhaled slowly. "Why are we doing this?" "Doing what?" "This interrogation." "I'm asking a simple question." "You're assuming things." "Then correct me." Another long pause. Finally, she said quietly, "Yes. He'll be there." The honesty landed harder than the lie earlier. I nodded slowly. "Okay." She studied my face, maybe expecting a stronger reaction. "You're not going to say anything else?" she asked. "What should I say?" "I don't know. You seem calm." I thought about that. She was right. A few months ago, this conversation would have exploded into accusations, anger, maybe even panic. But instead, I felt strangely steady. "I guess I'm just trying to understand," I said. "Understand what?" "When things changed." Her expression shifted slightly. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean." For a moment, I thought she might argue. Instead, she leaned back against the counter across from me. The distance between us suddenly felt enormous. "You think I'm cheating," she said. "I think you're somewhere else." Her eyebrows tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means when you laugh lately, it's never with me." The words came out quieter than I expected, but they hung in the air between us. Emily didn't respond right away. She looked down at the floor, thinking. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "You're imagining things." I shook my head slowly. "No." Another long silence passed. Then she picked up her bag again. "I'm going to be late," she said. "Okay." She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. For a moment, I thought she might say something more. Explain something. Instead, she simply said, "We'll talk later." The door closed behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. Strangely, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. What I felt was something quieter, but much heavier. Certainty. Because the moment she walked out the door to meet someone who made her smile the way she used to smile at me, That was the moment I realized our relationship wasn't ending. It had already ended. We just hadn't admitted it yet. I didn't follow her. The thought crossed my mind for a brief second after the door closed. I could have grabbed my jacket, gone down to the street, maybe even seen who she was meeting. But I didn't move. Because deep down I knew that seeing it wouldn't change anything. The real problem wasn't whether Emily was meeting Daniel. The real problem was that the woman I loved had slowly stopped choosing me long before that night. I walked into the living room and sat on the couch. The apartment was completely quiet. For years, silence in this place had felt peaceful. We used to sit together reading, working, or watching TV without needing to fill every moment with conversation. But that night, the silence felt different. Empty. I looked around the room and started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. The framed photo from our trip to the coast 3 summers ago. Emily standing barefoot in the sand, laughing because a wave had soaked her dress. The small plant she insisted we buy even though I kept forgetting to water it. The bookshelf we built together on a Sunday afternoon that ended with us ordering pizza because we were too tired to cook. Every object in the room carried a memory. But the strangest part was realizing that most of those memories belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought it might be Emily. It wasn't. Just a notification from work. I put the phone down again. That's when a quiet realization settled in my chest. I wasn't waiting for her to come home anymore. I was waiting for the truth. Another hour passed. At some point, I stood up and walked into the bedroom. Her side of the closet was slightly messy, clothes half pulled from hangers like she had been deciding what to wear earlier. On the nightstand was the book she had been reading for weeks. A bookmark sat halfway through it. Emily used to finish books quickly. She would talk excitedly about the characters and ask if I wanted to read them next. This one had been sitting unfinished for over a month. Another small detail. Another quiet sign of something changing. I returned to the living room and sat down again. Midnight came and went. Eventually, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside our apartment. Keys rattled softly in the lock. When Emily walked inside, she looked surprised to see the lights still on. "You're still awake?" "Yeah." She placed her bag on the chair and slipped off her shoes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said carefully, "We should probably talk." I nodded. "Yeah." She sat across from me on the couch, leaving the same small distance between us that had been there all week. Up close, I could see that she looked tired. Not guilty, not nervous, just emotionally drained. "How was it?" I asked. "The drinks." "Yeah. They were fine." That word again. Fine. I took a slow breath. "Did you have fun?" She hesitated. "Somewhat." That was probably the most honest answer she had given me all week. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "You think I don't love you anymore?" It wasn't a question, just a statement. I looked at her for a long time before answering. "I think something changed." She looked down at her hands. "For how long?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. "Months maybe." Another silence passed between us. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I think you're right." The words didn't hit like an explosion. They landed softly, like something that had already been true for a long time finally being spoken out loud. Emily looked up at me again, and for the first time all week her eyes looked genuinely emotional. "I didn't plan for it to happen like this," she said. "I know. I didn't wake up one day and decide to stop loving you. I know." Her voice cracked slightly. "I just started feeling different." The strange thing was that hearing her say it didn't destroy me, because I had already felt it. That quiet shift, the distance, the missing warmth. The day I realized she stopped loving me wasn't really that Tuesday night. It was the moment I understood that love can fade slowly while two people keep pretending everything is the same. And sometimes the most painful truth isn't betrayal. It's simply that someone you built your life with has become a stranger sitting across from you on the couch. Emily and I didn't scream that night. We didn't blame each other. We just sat there in the quiet apartment, finally honest about something we had both been avoiding. By the end of the conversation, we knew what would happen next. Not immediately, not dramatically, but inevitably. And strangely, the moment we admitted the truth, the tension that had filled the apartment for weeks finally disappeared. Because the day I realized she stopped loving me was also the day we stopped lying to each other.